I'm sitting here with Jason Wuerfel, managing principal partner of Books Brews, but all-around Renaissance man. You've been a podcaster, a rad brewer, an author. Thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, for most people that I work with, whether they're business owners, individuals, one of the things I really gravitate to a lot is this idea of having an abundance mindset. And with you having your hands in so many pots, where do you get your entrepreneurial spirit from?
Well, it's just ingrained in the DNA. It's like, well, I tell everyone I'm an entrepreneur because no one would hire me anyway. And but it's generational. The lineage story is great-great-grandfather came over from Norway, 15 years old with $15 in his pocket, but he was a monument cutter, and so worked his way to Traverse City, Michigan. We opened a monument store, and on the other side of my family is there's a long farming lineage, cherry farmers, and then like most farmers, pretty much everything you can do to try to make money off of farming. But later, my parents were literal bed sheets out the window elopers at 17 and 18, like literally in the middle of the night, stole away, couldn't get married until they were both turned 18. And by the time I was born, we were living in hotels solidly until I was 6 or 7, and then on and off until I was 12 or 13. And so it just got to see firsthand that it was like, business isn't what I do, it's just who I am. I mean, that's the same thing for my parents. Like, it's not, it's a hobby and it's what I do. And, people say, like, one of the questions I get is like, oh, how many hours a week do you put in? And I think it's not even a question that registers. The best way I heard it put for someone else was say like, well, how many hours a week are you a parent? That's just what you are. You don't track how many hours you have to work, you know what I mean, with your kids. Sure. Or with your family. So I think that's it's as natural to me as breathing. It's just being an entrepreneur.
Fantastic. Well, as we sit here in the mothership of Books and Brews, for those that may be unfamiliar with the brand and what you guys are about, what is the origin story of how this concept of Books and Brews came about?
Yeah, so it's I'm trying to make this story as brief as possible every time I get the question, but teacher coming out of college, also a baseball player, still trying to play. My parents had just kind of sold their hotels and retired, and about a year into teaching, I wasn't really happy with that lifestyle. I guess, again, like, being the entrepreneur in me just wanted to come out, and the punch in, punch out was just not something that was working for me. And my parents asked, let's go into the baseball park business. Traverse City, Michigan, my hometown at that time. I say Traverse City, I went to Glen Lake High School, so if anyone listening, I say Traverse City because people know it more.
Sure.
But Traverse City at that time had very little to do, especially nighttime entertainment. Like, it was a lot of natural attractions like beaches and shopping, retail and kind of quaint sort of, coastal town sort of living, but there really wasn't nighttime family entertainment. And my parents kind of saw it as a way of giving back to the community, having something positive and community space. And so we got involved in the ballpark. Traverse City Beach Bums was the name. We had a 12-year run. And what I love so much about the baseball business, and I correlated a lot to going into Books and Brews, and that's why I feel like it's an important part of the story, is that in baseball, no one curates your experience. Like, you walk in, and there's certainly people to help you find your seat if you need them, but it's unlike any other sporting venue or even concert venue where the nature of the event is in itself unintentionally repressive of experience. You go to your seat, you watch the game, you leave. Mm-hmm. Baseball is casual. That's why they call it a ballpark, instead of a stadium. Like, a lot of people don't even make it to their seats. A lot of people spend half the game walking around the stadium. Usually people walk the whole stadium during the game. They see all the different angles of it, and that just doesn't happen in like football or basketball or even like concerts. And so when witnessing this over the 12 years, seeing that baseball, or the business of baseball, really saved the sport of baseball and minor league baseball. There's not really any other viable. I mean, look at the G League for NBA. Look at the attempts of like XFL and stuff like that for football. And certainly you have college sports that do really well for them. But no one's ever been able to have like a thriving minor league system fan base wise than baseball. And the reason it's not about baseball at all. Like, baseball is just what's happening on the field. But the exit surveys show you that no one knows, people can't even name players, let alone who won, let alone who played. People come when the gates open and leave before the game starts, just to have a place to go to walk the kids around, play the games, grab an ice cream cone, have a hot dog, and then, oh, there's a baseball game going on. And so I really felt like being an English major and seeing the eventual sort of collapse of paper and just period.
Right.
I was going to say books, but it's paper period.
Yeah.
That I felt that the same sort of model that saved baseball could save bookstores, and there's a lot more to that. But like I kind of like to say that this is my performance art piece for community and connection and things that are issues in society that are ingrained in the technology that's making our life easier, is also disconnecting us from deeper relationships that we're growing in width of relationships. Like, we don't need the 20-year reunion anymore. Like, we know who had the baby or because of Facebook, we know who took the new job because of LinkedIn.
Right.
Like, but we're losing depth of relationship because of that, because we don't pick up the phone because we already know, because we don't go to the reunion because we already know, we don't invest our time sitting down and doing. And so really the idea of Books and Brews more than anything is event space that draws people in a way that they curate their own experience, and a bookstore creates that. Because you walk into a bookstore, you don't have to make a purchase. You walk into a restaurant, a traditional assembly line restaurant, and you can't just walk around and walk out. Your hostess to seat people don't tell you this in restaurants, but you're not allowed to walk around. You know that, right? They're assigning your seat like you're in a classroom and you're 8 again, and you're not allowed to move. The server, they will come to you, and because they have to keep the aisles clean in order to move 2% faster, make 1% more profit, and turn tables, And when you have that, you have an unintentional forcing of atmosphere. So it doesn't matter if people even want it or not. If you walk into a place that is a slightly upscale steakhouse and you're wearing sweatpants and flip-flops, like, you're going to feel out of place, and it's not intentional. It's not anything somebody says to you. It's not anything somebody does. It's just the nature of that assembly line process. It's the same thing if you walk in a suit and tux into some dive bar in the outskirts of town, you're going to feel out of place. Even if they're the friendliest people on the planet, they've unintentionally made people feel out of place, and it's because of the curating of experience, whether it's the hostess to seat or whether it's just the atmosphere of the place is narrowing demographically unintentionally. So when you remove the hostess and you make an association with another place where people don't feel that way, like a bookstore, you bring in wide swaths of demographics where they don't notice each other. Just like the ballpark. You go to the ballpark, you see family of 5 next to the single dudes drinking beers, next to, suits and ties, next to, and they don't even notice each other. And you get that same kind of experience at the bookstore, and you get that same kind of experience here. And then you use events, much like minor league baseball, to be sort of the fast track into the communities, the gamers, the live music, the trivia, or like the themed events like Harry Potter. Like, you might never even heard of this place, but we can advertise so narrowly now. The advantage is we have a Harry Potter event. We can find a demographic that's going to like the event, but it's also going to like the place. And so as long as we can sort of repeat that, that's kind of the overall process of not worrying about, I've no part of the reason we're in the location Mothership originally is I have no worry advertising to foot traffic. Like, it makes no difference to me. Like, it's all about relationships and lifetime value, and I even hate that because it's so like corporate-y. Like, I almost want to it's like razor blades off my tongue. But like, it's just about building relationships so people come around and they feel like, I want people to feel like, and this sounds negative, I don't mean it this way, I want people to feel like we're so ingrained in the community that if we didn't exist, or the community wouldn't exist. Like, this is just the place you go to see the people you always see after the thing you just did, or before the thing, or on the weekends, and you walk in. It's not a surprise to see those 7 or 8 people that you know, and then you meet more people here like that, and then you come anyway. That's sort of the
Gotcha. Well,
long-winded version.
Well, that sense of community is what a lot of the breweries that I've talked to, the sense of community, wanted to bring somewhere where people can congregate. And I love your tagline, a place for people without a place. I think that's great when you're trying to create this, especially coming out of the year we just did. I mean, it's just where it was kind of disjointed, and now we're finding our way back. As it relates to the brewery blends that you guys do, obviously creativity is a hallmark of this space, and that's emblematic in a lot of the names of the beers as I'm looking straight here. My favorite is obviously Cream and Punishment,
Right on.
and obviously I see a consistent theme with the books and the characters into your beers. But what goes into naming the select brands and brews that you make?
Nostalgia.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the reason why I fell in love with books in the first place is because it totally changed my life. Like I picked up sci-fi fantasy in 3rd grade and never put it down, and the worlds that it opened and it changed my life. And so the idea of having the bookstore to be able to provide that was super awesome for me. Now, about the beer in particular, the names come so easily because of that. I mean,
Right.
these aren't like, the books, the names, the characters. These aren't just like marketing materials we're coming up with. These are people. These are people and places and things and worlds that exist for me. And so, being able to have Clifford the Big Red Ale or Nancy Drew and the Hoppy Boys, or these are all snapshots of either my childhood or my current situation with my kids, the hope is sort of like the association of memories. People come in and they see Clifford the Big Red Ale, they see Nancy Brew, they see Charlie and the Chocolate Stout, and they're not 40 with problems anymore and bills that are past due. They're an 8-year-old kid watching Gene Wilder do a front flip in front of the gates at the Wonka factory. Like that's where they are. And that's part of the beauty of books too, and it's part of what goes into the beers as well. From just a thought perspective, is that there's such a crossover into like visual, modern fiction, and it's never going to end. Like they're never going to stop making recreations of Shakespeare. They're going to continue to, the work of Roald Dahl, right? Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and stuff. These are things that are going to live forever,
right.
and they're going to be things that, much like a ballpark, I brought my kid, my dad brought me, I bring my kids, and it's a generational experience. And that's how books are too. The same thing with the kids' books, and it's so approachable and quick to, and what it is also, and I think that craft beer struggles with this at times, is that it's also not intimidating. Is that sometimes whenever, I shouldn't say craft beer, I should say any like hobbyist or really where people dedicate their whole lives to any kind of hobbyist thing like that, where people go very narrow, very deep, that it becomes very intimidating for the new person to walk into that place. It's very hard for someone who knows everything about this subject, from the scientific, all the way up, to not sound condescending or not be condescending when they field the same question 87 times a day. And I think when you have the approachability of familiar things, and books provide that. Books are warm and familiar to us, Very few people, I think, maybe movies provide more of a visceral sort of like reaction if you got like a nightmare of like a scary movie.
Sure.
But I think novels, I think it's overall very approachable. So I think, the association of the books, the association of the names of the things, I think that's part of what goes into having the craft beer be, definitely seeking a demographic that feels comfortable coming in as that first time and asking those questions where they would be uncomfortable in sort of, other scenarios. And that supersedes craft beer. There's obviously a lot of hobbyist places where people, I think about me with like woodworking. When I started woodworking, I don't even want to go to like Home Depot and ask. I don't look like an idiot. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so that's an issue obviously in craft beer, just because it's broadened now, but it was a very narrow sort of part of beer for a long time.
Gotcha. Well, growing up in Michigan, I like asking this question because there's always a story around the first beer that hooked you, that kind of sent you on a craft path. When I was in college, everybody was drinking the cheapest thing possible because we all had budgets, right? And then I had a fat tire for the first time. And I'm like, what is this? Yeah. So what's yours?
For me, it was the Morimoto Soba Ale. It was my inspiration for Shogun, which was it's still behind me. We're taking off. No, it's not a flagship anymore. It's a seasonal now. But I was actually same thing for me. I was born in '80, so like craft beer wasn't even like on campus when I was like, I don't even know what craft beer. I guess like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and Fat Tire, and maybe not even Fat Tire. I don't think. Around then, I don't think that had really come around.
Adams, maybe.
Maybe Sam Adams, but like that was the only thing I knew of craft beer was that like the nationally distributed, the big breweries. And so it was even years later I went to a restaurant and it happened to be run by a childhood friend of mine, and they just had a handful of beers, and I was just like, I don't know what that is, and I was starting to get more adventurous. And I remember drinking it, and soba's like Japanese like buckwheat noodles, and like so it's got buckwheat in the beer. I just remember thinking like, I didn't know beer could taste like this. Like this is awesome, and I need to figure out how to. And then I got super lucky when we moved here to Indianapolis, so 2007 ish. My wife's very first friend, like at the workplace, her husband's from Ireland, and we started hanging out, and he worked in spirits. He was he worked at several, as a GM of several places. Vine and Table is where he was at the time. Now he runs it. Now he just opened a great place called Story Company downtown too. It's like real high end, really the same sort of thing, like community, culture driven. But every time he would come over, he would always bring in these craft beers I've never heard of before, and I was like, this is awesome. And then there was shortly after that someone was like, I know what it was. It was like, what do we get you for Christmas? And I literally Googled, gifts for him, because I don't know, because I'm like I'm so easily pleased. I was just the upbringing I had, like I don't need things, and it was like homebrew kit. And I was like, I'll do that. I'll brew beer. And then my buddy Dennis started telling me there's this great homebrew shop, and I can't remember it. I think it's Austin Homebrew Supply out of Texas. They will provide like clone recipes for you, And so he kept bringing me beers and be like, oh, they got a clone recipe for this beer. I can only get it in England. You should try this. And I started trying, cloning beers. And then this was the soba was the first recipe I ever made on my own. But that was the beer that really stuck with me. As something that I really needed to create. There was certainly some other ones early on, but that was the main one.
Perfect. Well, that kind of dovetails into the next question, because obviously this lineup that you have, whether here or at Rad, those are your successes, right? And give me a fun story around something that was a failure that you thought maybe was a good concoction, but came out dead on arrival. Oh, okay. Well, I'll give you two stories. One that was a failure that ended up awesome, and then there's plenty of both. But I think any brewer or home brewer would tell you, right? Like anytime you change your system or have a new system, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. There's always quirks, There's always like where you put a piece of equipment could change something by a fraction, or or you just screw up and you put too much in, you put the wrong thing in, or something happens, you have to walk away and the timing's off, or whatever it is. And so the first time I brewed Clifford here, and I actually called it Clifford, obviously because it was a red ale, but when I homebrewed it, it was meant to be more of a session ale. It was meant to be, even though it was Clifford, the little red ale. And I brewed it, and it came out to 7.3 or 7.4%, and I was like, uh-oh. I was like, well, Clifford the Big Red Ale. Yeah. And it ended up being it still to this day is probably like our number 1 or 2 bestseller, depending on the time of year. And, but, yeah, I've had plenty of failures. And not for the big batches, probably, but for the small batch stuff,
I would always try to like section off 5 gallons and then just dump something weird in there just to put it on tap. Just be like, is there peanut butter and jelly, jalapeno, wheat, whatever. And most of that stuff was palatable, But for whatever reason, oh no, I guess I have 2 stories. I guess the second one's better. So the first one I'll get through faster. I put Frank's Red Hot in a beer one time. Not a good idea. Ooh. That was a real bad idea for a lot of reasons. I'm sure you can imagine. But the one that, and I haven't, it isn't frustrating me enough to figure out how they do it. I just think they're lying to me. But up home, there's a great brewery called Right Brain, and I was in there right around the time I was starting Books and Brews, and they have of course, it's cherry capital of the world, right? We have the cherry festival, obviously cherry farmers on one side of my family, and they had a cherry pie beer. And I tasted it, and it was fantastic. It tasted exactly like cherry pie filling. It tasted like, I feel like you could taste the crust in it. I was like, I don't know how you get all these flavors to happen like this. And the bartender said, we put cherry pies in the fermenter. I was like, no, you don't. Like, that's not a thing you do. Because obviously, like, the butter and the oil and the whatever, like, it sour immediately. And she was like, nope, that's what we do. And I was like, well, that can't possibly be a thing. But what I'll try to do is I'll try to put pies in the mash. So I came back and I'm doing a pumpkin pie beer, and I put pumpkin pies in the mash. And when it came out, because of course then all that filters out, and then you still boil it afterwards. That was my thought process. And very early brewing, I guess I just wasn't smart enough to see what was going to happen. When it came out, the wort tasted great, right? Because it had all the sugars in it, and I still use extra spices because I knew it wasn't good. But you had all the regular pumpkin pie flavors that you get out of like a pumpkin beer, but it added that extra something. It was really good. And the issue is, of course, the yeast starts to eat the sugar. And it just flattened all the sugar and the flavors that I got out of the pie. Like, the yeast just ate it all. And so it came out just tasting extremely bland. I mean, so bland. It was a dump. I just dumped it. It wasn't any good.
Yeah, I was talking to Andrew Kastner, Mashcraft. They tried to make a beer. It was a bacon beer, and they couldn't get rid of the fat. So
that happened to me as well. I tried beef jerky.
Ooh. Beef jerky.
But it was the same thing. We tried to put bacon. Well, I didn't do bacon in the process. What we did is we took our stout and we just put bacon in the keg. But it was the same thing. Yeah, when it comes out, it looks fine for a second, but then it starts to like separate in your glass and it looks pretty gross. The beef jerky was a fun idea, and we didn't get. That was our thought. It was like, okay, bacon was greasy. Let's try beef jerky, because same thing we found with fruit, like. The dehydrated fruit seems to do a little better than like any kind of fresh frozen fruit seems to work okay, but like like banana chips and stuff like that seems to do better. And I'm talking about putting it actually in the keg. Like we use puree when we put it like in the fermenter. Sorry, I was talking about fruit. You're talking about beef jerky. Yeah. We thought, well, it's not as greasy, and we were right. We didn't get the grease, but it was just tasted like you're drinking beef. Like, it was just so beefy. It was like there was no. And we tried to use stout, like it was like like beef jerky stout, and it just came out like you're drinking beef jerky. Like, it was just way too strong.
That's funny. I mean, what I love about talking to guys that are behind the curtain with the breweries is that you're all mad scientists, but especially in your case, for anybody that played baseball growing up, I did. You made it a lot farther than I did. It's a game based on failure.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
You bat 300, you fail 70% of the time, you get in the Hall of Fame. Has playing baseball as you grew up and getting to a semi-pro level, has that helped you overcome failures in different ventures or anything that you've tried to start?
Yeah, I think I owe my entire life to baseball. I think equal parts sort of lineage, parenting that kind of molded me into the entrepreneur that I am. Baseball really. I mean, baseball makes you grow up fast. I mean, if you can't take it, it's gonna chew you up and spit you out in a heartbeat. And as soon as you think you got it figured out, like, the next embarrassing moment is coming. And I taught baseball for a very long time too. I had baseball academies in between all this, and you see it so early on that the first swing and miss, the first time a kid gets hit, the first time they get a ball through the legs on the field, is a real watershed moment. in terms of, I feel like how it's handled. And by the time I get a kid, by the time they're 12 or 13, they're so afraid of failure. They're so afraid of being embarrassed that all the mechanics are locked up. Like it's just to make contact, right? It's just to not be embarrassed instead of taking their shot to succeed. And it's a real metaphor. Like it's a real shame. And also the game in itself is won and lost by lack of mistakes early and by big splashing moments late. And so it's real hard for those kids that grow up just being like, just block the ball, just throw strikes, just make contact, to then all of a sudden, now kids can throw harder, now kids can field, now kids can hit. And all of the defense by offense goes flying out the window, and those kids get cut, and then, or they get really embarrassed on the baseball field. And but yes, to answer your question, being able to go through that, the really like devastating pounding of times where, like I've had the yips twice in my career. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's literally where the ball comes out of your hand and it could almost hit you in the foot, or it could go straight in the sky. And part of what happens is just like the mind muscle just locks up and your hand can't, like the flex of your fingers, like you can't. And so you literally cannot get the ball to roll off your fingers. And it's just, and the mental anguish of getting over that is months and months and months of mental work to try to work through it. And I've had that twice in my freshman year in college, and then the first year I was trying to play pro ball. I got cut 4 or 5 times before I finally figured I wasn't good enough. That's not true. I still think I'm good enough, but which I think is in and of itself the best people I've ever known. Like the future big leaguers, the people who made the big leagues that I played with, were the people who were the most resistant to the game telling them they suck. That they could go out and go 0 for 15, 0 for 30. They're a pitcher that could give up 15 runs, and they're going to walk off the field and still be like, I was the best guy out there today. And those are the guys that made the big leagues. And yeah, there was physical tools there. It's not just like, sure. But there was a lot of other players that had the same physical tools that didn't make it. And that was the great differentiator. I feel like I had the mental to do it. I just didn't have the physical. Like I wasn't, my body couldn't hold up good enough, and I didn't have like the high ceiling like a lot of the 6'4" guys, the guys that run, like 6'2", 60s and all that kind of stuff. But
that's fun. Well, I know a lot of guys that played baseball. I hung around when I was the single A for the Twins. Were in Fort Myers where I grew up. So yeah, had the opportunity to be a bat boy a couple times, so you get to talk to some of these guys, and I always loved the stories.
The miracles.
Yeah, yeah, the miracle, right? Yeah. So coming up through that, what's the funniest baseball story you've ever experienced, either yourself or you heard from the guys that you were playing with or just pounding around, man? Because it always just. Because there's one here recently of George Brett shitting his pants, and I told my guys I'd bring this up because the guy is just wheeling a yarn about shitting his pants in Las Vegas, and then at the end of it just says, "Who's pitching today?" It's a truly fantastic baseball story. If you want to look it up, Google George Brett shits his pants. It's funny as hell. What's an experience you had with something similar to where just guys that just keeping it loose?
Well, personal experience, there's endless. I say that, so I played about half a season of independent baseball after I was done with college, and then the next year I got cut, and so I hung it up. I didn't hang it up. I was trying to play still. No one would hire me. But I showed up, and we were the Mid-Missouri Mavericks in Columbia, Missouri, which is University of Missouri's where they are. And there was 2 guys. Okay, I went to University of Michigan, and there's 2 guys on the team from Central Michigan. One of them is the now husband of. So my wife was a gymnast there. We'll just say like that's how I knew the guys. Like so our wives were gymnasts together at Central Michigan. So there was some connection there. And so I get into the locker room, and I'm asking them. They got there a little bit before me. I'm asking about the guy because we had just all finished at the same time. I'm asking about the team, the guys, and someone walks by me who is probably the tallest baseball player I'd ever seen. Like we had guys who were 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" even, but this dude was like 6'9", 6'10", and I was like, who's that guy? So I can't even remember his name, but my buddy Dave who's a pitcher sitting next to me, and so I said, that guy's obviously a pitcher, and they're like, yeah, and I'm like, so how hard does he throw? Because back in that day, especially, steroid era, it felt very superficial. Like the scouting of it, it was like guys who were tall got drafted, guys who were fast got drafted, it was all very like single lane, like the biggest guys, the fastest guys. I didn't even feel like they got, like the scouts were just like, who's the tallest dudes? Like, we'll just draft them, even if you threw like 85, And so I was like, I just figured this guy, if he's tall, he's a pitcher, he's never been drafted before. Like, he must throw soft. And I was like, well, how hard does he throw? And they're like, low 90s. And I was like, the hell's he doing here? They're like, just wait. The first 2 nights I was there, we cleared benches because the other team thought he was trying to throw at them. And he legitimately, just like every other pitch he threw was like behind their back, over their head, 40 feet into the dirt.
Little Rick Vaughn, prior to glasses.
And it was, and it was just like, I guess they just had enough. Like, the only way to get this guy out of the game is just charge the mound. And so, and our bullpen was in left center field, so I had like a 300-foot run in catching gear to try to get in there. And by the time I got there, everyone's just yelling at each other. It's like, we didn't really fight. But I was like, really, the first 2 nights I'm playing here, we're clearing benches? This is ridiculous.
That's awesome.
And my other story about that same season is there was like a chain link fence, and the bullpen was behind it, right down the left field line. And the seats were kind of like a double seat, so we were kind of sitting up on top to see better with our feet kind of like on the bench. And where the backstop is, there was a little gap underneath it, and there's a skunk problem there. And so it's a night game, we're sitting down there, and a skunk pops out. And people nowadays don't think this story is as funny because or maybe if you're not a hunter, you don't come. So the skunk disappears. My buddy Dave, again, same guy, was like, if that skunk pops out, I'm gonna hit him with a baseball. And we're 60 feet away or more, right. 70 feet away from the backstop, and the gap is this big, and the skunk sticks his head out that far, and Dave picks the baseball out of the bag and sidearm slings it down and hits the skunk in the face with the baseball. And now the skunk is like out cold. And now the smell starts.
Oh, man.
And so in the middle of the game, it's like the 6th inning, here comes the bullpen screaming, running from the outfield. Ah! And I forgot my bag. So I run back to grab my baseball bag, and the skunk is like in its death throes. Like it's like writhing. It's not a good scene. It's screaming. It's ugly. So we run back in. The groundskeepers go out, and the way it was you could like, if people were standing in the bullpen, there was a banner, so you couldn't see people like from the waist down, so you couldn't see like the skunk. But the groundskeeper goes out with like the infield rake and kind of ends the job, so to speak. So all you can see is like the overing and crushing, and then the Missouri football field, like the practice football fields, are behind the stadium, and all you can see is reach down and in the middle of the night, this white streak end over end flipping up, and he just threw it onto the Missouri's football field.
Their problem now.
And it stunk like skunk spray the rest of the season.
Ugh.
But there was one time a skunk just like, before that, the skunk just like got in the outfield, right? And it's like, it's not like a squirrel or a bird. You're not just going to shoot it off the field. Yeah. It was like, I guess we're not playing until the skunk just decides to leave.
Oh, brutal. Fun story, man. Man, when I in my day job, when I sit down with clients, I'm just trying to come from a educational base of educating, guiding, counsel, and a lot of times I just have to show people that there's just 4 challenges to building wealth, whether it's getting a business owner organized or it's finding lost opportunity costs of what they're already doing. As you sit here as a principal owner of Books Brews, Jason, what are some of the challenges that you face as you kind of move into 21, going into 22, coming out of 2020 that we all would like to throw away?
I honestly think the biggest issue is all of society's been cooped up for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And it's a little and we had too much time. Like, all the reasons why Books and Brews exist, I like to tell people, is because you get to know people before ideas. So there's people that I've known here for a year before I find out they think something that I disagree with. By the time I find that out, we have a discussion and I have context to why they feel that way because I've known them.
Right.
And we live in a world digitally where we get to know ideas before we get to know the people, and we have no context. And, like, for example, heavier issues like gun control. If you've been robbed by a gunpoint 5 times, you probably have a different view of carrying a gun than someone who has never been robbed before. Or if you grow up in the country and you hunt, you have a different feeling about guns and having them in the house. And the issue is, I think right now, we're coming from 18 months where we've just been barraged with each other's ideas online, and we've been so glued in because that's the only place we could find anyone, even on Zoom, that we haven't had the personal connection and personal context, and we're coming out of it, and everyone's so on edge, so ready to fight, so ready to and I think in a customer service business it's very difficult, especially when, like, for example, we employ primarily under 35 and we serve primarily over 35. And so you had during COVID especially, I think it's always been this way, but like when I was growing up, I didn't even know what generation I was. Like, I didn't even hear people talking about generations until people were starting to like shit on millennials all the time online. And then it just became a real thing, especially, okay, boomer, and then there's like this now it's like generational warfare. Like, we don't have enough going on with culture that we have to now fight because of how old we are. And that is a real difficulty in any customer service business, is that people are just ready to fight. They're just ready to throw down about it before getting to know anyone. And so how do you navigate those waters? It's just I think I'm lucky that the business is designed to get people to engage each other, that they have to. Like, I tell the staff that, part of the reason we don't have a hostess is because now you have to speak to people. Like, you can't just wait. Like, bartenders at larger restaurants, which is nothing wrong with that, wait for the tickets to go off. They take the ticket and they fill the order and they put it in the well, and that's just their job. And a lot of restaurants are designed to minimize your contact with people, and we are designed to maximize it. And so I think I'm just lucky that I've done that we're already kind of set up to try to get over that hurdle, to try to add some understanding and events and the diversity of the events, and like talking about kind of like the baseball idea. But it's a real issue, I think, for all customer service based businesses, and also in the restaurant industry. Is that there's not as many, and this is a good thing. It's a good thing that there's a lot more opportunities for kids, whether they're in high school or college or just after college, or even through their 20s. There's so many more things nowadays. Like, when I was in high school, it was restaurant, retail, hard labor. Like, that was your choice of things you got to do between 16 to 18, or 12 for me, and being an entrepreneur from 12 to 18. But nowadays, you can make money off Instagram. Like, why would you go get that first job at McDonald's and get yelled at? And there's a lot less people, I think, then because of that, even coming out of, because one of the things I think we all develop is not just I want to go into that industry, but also I want to do the opposite of what I've learned, or like I want to be a better boss than what I've done. I want to have better food than what I had to serve at McDonald's when I was a kid, or so there's kind of like almost like an anti-inspiration. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And we're not experienced. I don't think we don't have to go through the shitty jobs anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we lose a little perspective, and then also people just aren't. I don't think there's less people, and I'm just making this up. People can disagree. Like, I'm sure there's probably statistics are just considering a career in the restaurant industry, like career bartender, career server, career. Not that there was ever like wide swaths of people that were really like fired up to be, like spending a career as a general manager in a restaurant. But I think that restaurant management, I think that it's a couple different things. Also, the other benefit is it's way easier to open up your own business because the invention of food trucks, and now cloud kitchens, and now larger, the cloud kitchen or a commissary type kitchen where you can have your little bake shop concept that sells just online because there's this massive commercial kitchen. You're renting your little zone of it. You know what I mean? And that kind of stuff, those inventions are awesome for the overall impact of what we do, but it's the shrinking of the middle, so it's going to cloud ghost kitchen, delivery service, like delivery only type places, or like private food truck, mobile type settings, the private chef, the in-house chef, the come to your house chef, and then drive-throughs, the places that if they didn't have a drive-through wouldn't be in business, which is 90% of the drive-throughs.
Sure.
Right? Or the super high-end institutions, the steakhouses, the places that have been there for 50, 60 years, like those places aren't going anywhere because it's still the place you go for the anniversary. It's the place you go for the thing.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that's going to get squeezed out ultimately, is that if you're not the place people go for the thing, then that's where you're going to get squeezed, because I'm going to be able to in 10 years get a St. Elmo's steak, medium rare, flown still hot by a drone, to my balcony.
It's not another realm of
and that's,
possibility,
it's going to happen. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And Domino's Pizza is going to have one storefront and zero customer facing space, and they're just going to be able to drone fly every pizza over a whole city. And and I think it's already an issue, like with Uber Eats and third party places coming in and giving delivery options to places that never could deliver before. If you can get the same experience in your living room like Domino's Pizza, you're not going to, that's why Domino's Pizza there's nowhere to sit. Shout out Domino's. Sorry, I'm not going to. I apologize. I apologize to all my Domino's friends. I don't have it. But that's why there's no place to sit. Is because the experience is the same as the pizza at home as it is in the store. In fact, it's even better because you don't have to go anywhere. And so if your product is like that, that's the kind of place where you're going to be in trouble. That you're just have to go to Cloud Kitchen, Ghost Kitchen, and that's aside from I think just like navigating the politics of personal sort of like anguish and drama and like trauma really that has come through the last year and a half. I think that dealing with kind of the middle of the squeeze in the middle, like the non-event restaurant, and I think that's part of the reason why like we do the things we do is because it's the ballpark. Like you're going for the it's like if you have a ballpark without baseball. I mean, that's the type of restaurant that's going to get squeezed. Or tap room or whatever. Like there has to be the thing to come for, and that thing might be that fresh pint off the tap lines is way better than getting it in a can at home, because you get the valet type experience of the person behind the bar that can tell you what hops are in it, how it was brewed, and like there's an educational sort of step-by-step walkthrough of that process. But I think that's what you have to have. You really have to have that almost like what would you call it, like white glove sort of service, or the event, Well,
let me ask you this. I mean, as you guys branch out with franchisees, I mean, one of the cornerstones of what I do with my clients is that, we look at 25 different areas and they pay us on one. We're more of a comprehensive. So as somebody comes to you and says, Jason, I love the concept, I want to become a franchisee, what advice do you bestow on potential franchisees and potential partners that want to open up a space similar to your own?
Start a lemonade stand first. Dead serious.
Yeah.
If you can't, 3 things, see if I can get them all. Number 1, go put a lemonade stand in your front yard, and then do a P&L on the products you buy and making it, and the water you use, and the electricity, and do a real like run it like a real business, because it is.
Yeah, sure.
And bring the cash in and put it in the bank, and then try to buy product with what you made and see how much spoils and how much you have to throw away and measure it. And if you can't do that, like it's already over, and then go take your lemonade where you don't have a stand and go sell it on the street. And if you can't sell your lemonade on the street to 100 people, it's already over. You have to be able to run the tiny little microcosm. You have to be able to talk to people and describe and sell the product. And you have to be willing to do that, to get out there and hustle and do it. If you can't do those couple things, it doesn't matter how good the concept is. It's already destined for failure. So you have to be able to, go hand out 500 business cards and meet every single person in the area you want to go in and talk to them about traffic, camp outside those places and watch the traffic. Is it the traffic you want? What traffic are you looking for? Talk to the people walking by. You know, where do you live? Why are you here? How did you get here? What route did you take? Maybe there's a place that's better because it's on a better traffic pattern that is 3 miles away that's going to catch the same exact people. And I think that's an issue. People want to be Maine and Maine, and they don't realize that all the people going to Maine are driving through non-Main Street,
Right.
where they could pop up for half the price and be way more successful and still catch the same traffic with easier parking and easier overhead. And so it's the basics that, and the reason why I say those things is because there is a non-zero, and this isn't me bagging on people that want to franchise. I'm just saying, like, this is part of the DNA of someone that is, what I said is part of the DNA of an entrepreneur. Like, that's just things we think about.
Right.
Like, what's that stuff? The DNA of the franchisepreneur, let's call it, is that they're trying to skip that stuff. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, they want to skip graphic design. They want to skip, like, employee manuals and checklists, and creating all that stuff from scratch is extremely daunting and time consuming, and has been polished over the course of a lot of years. And that's extremely worth it. But knowing why that checklist was built that way, knowing why that employee manual contains those policies in it, knowing why the logo is designed the way it is, and how it's used and where it's used, and the trial and error and over the course of time, like, you still have to know, and I liken it to, it's part of the reason why I failed as a math teacher is because I went into math, I became a teacher because I wasn't a natural student, and I saw a system that was only designed to benefit the people who are natural at it. So what happens? Who becomes teachers? To people who are good at the system that you live in. So you have this perpetual cycle of giving and taking from the people who are good at the thing. So my brain works slightly differently. So I wanted to get in to speak to the kid who says, I don't, yeah, it's a formula, but why do we even use it? Like, I'm skeptical that this is even the right answer because I don't even know why we're doing this. Like, why is balance the equation a thing? Like, why are we solving for X? None of this makes sense. Like, yes, I understand what you told me. I understand how to get the answer on paper, but I want to know why we're doing this in the first place. Like, what does it even matter? And nobody wants to hear that. They want the equation.
Well, I think that's a perfect thing, because I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. It's a
me
cornerstone
too.
of what we do in our practice is that you got to know the why.
Right.
If you know the why, the how and the what, and the journey to get there become that much easier to define because you know why you're doing it.
Right.
Right. So that's a principle that, I try to preach in my day-to-day is that, hey, why are we doing this?
Right.
Why are we here?
Right.
Let's answer that first, and then we can unpack that and then develop a strategy and model around that. Because if you don't understand that, then it just becomes a habit that gets repeated that you don't break. So and I think entrepreneurs have especially I think ADD happens to run pretty rampant in the entrepreneur community. It's part of the reason why we can't, we're always looking at the next shiny, fun quarter to pick up. But, the superpower there is the power of observation. I like to say it's not that I can't pay attention to one thing, it's I see everything. And that becomes a problem because other things are sometimes more interesting than the current thing I'm doing. The business is sort of an example of that, the books, the beer, the games, all that stuff that we do. But the one grounding principle that I think sometimes there's a guy named Inky Johnson, if you don't know who he is, he's great. Yeah, and one of his real short, quippy videos, he says that I like to use a lot is it's hard to see the picture when you're in the frame. And I think a lot of people get into business and it's like, oh, we're doing this. And a lot of it becomes like, oh yeah, it's the P&L and got to make money and we got to save money. And you sit down and you go like, especially for employees sometimes, I feel like stop for a second and say, who are we here to serve? And you go, the customers. We open to serve customers. We open to serve guests. We say guests, right.
Because, and that is a real grounding moment, because a lot of times we start to think about things in terms of how can we make more money, how can we save more money, how can we do this, and it needs to come back to who are we doing this for? We're not doing this for us, so how can we do things better for the people that come in the door? And when you find that, the rest falls into place, and it is exactly the why too, right?
Sure.
And why we do this, a place for people without a place, it's why I like putting the word people in the mission statement, is because we start to think about, it doesn't say, and I remind that this is one of my things I have to repeat all the time, not have to, but I think it's important to, is to say, it doesn't say people who tip good. It doesn't say people who have well-behaved kids. It doesn't say bands that show up on time, or people that are nice to you, or, people who compliment you. It says a place for people, and people are inherently flawed, and we have to understand that coming in, and we are their place. And so part of being a place for people who are inherently flawed is, finding ways to ease their suffering on some level, right? Like the corporate jargons of solving, what's pain points and solving problems. And I think some of that, maybe because a lot of what I've done has just naturally built from a practical standpoint, like living in hotels to now, is that some of that doesn't land with me. You know what I mean? But easing people's suffering does, everyone's coming in with some sort of trauma, even if it's a bad phone call they just had, and a lot of times that spills out here, and we have to make sure to be ready for it and understand it, because most, unfortunately, and not unfortunately, but I think a lot of us, me included, if we don't wake up and go, I'm gonna have challenges today I didn't expect, what happens is you have challenges you don't expect,
sure,
and then you're pissed off about it,
Gotcha.
So anyway.
All right, last question.
Yeah.
This is when I meet somebody for the first time, I always sit down and I ask them, if we were to work together 3 years from now, what would need to be accomplished, whether it be professionally, emotionally, financially, to where we could look back on our time spent together as valuable. As you sit here as the principal owner of Books Brews, what do you see as the goals for the next 3 years of what you would want to accomplish? What do you want to see happen with Books Brews?
Well, I tell you, I just feel, I feel like the absolute luckiest person in the world. I think that in a weird way, I've been I feel like groomed and designed and encouraged and coached my whole life, or punched in the face like baseball did for me a lot, or as entrepreneurship has done a lot, that has made me the most ready for these types of scenarios than most people. I'm designed for when things go bad. I'm just designed for it. I can find not just the silver linings, but I can find what to do next. I can find the next thing. And for me, my whole life is, a place where people thought a place, helping people where I didn't get the help is kind of my personal mission statement. And so when for a question like that, it's more really same train, different car. I don't even care if it's Books and Brews, which I hope it is. I love to be around still, in 3 years, but I'm just always gonna find a way to reach people who need something, whether it's through collectibles, which we did very well in during the pandemic,
Sure.
finding, whether it's physically bringing people in through that medium, whether it's reaching those people online, whether it's building community online or building community in person. I mean, really, my only hope, and Books and Brews for me was never, is probably part of my problems at some point in the journey, was never a financial journey for me. It never was. I never have run the business to try to make a profit. You know what I mean? I've always tried to invest it in ways, invest the money back in ways that I can, because I don't need much. And so for a question like that, really all I care about is that there's people who I've impacted, that there's employees that I've hopefully, I just come back to pulling that book off the shelf, Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and just sitting in my basement under the lamp and having that just change my life, and I just love, it's not even if it's a book, it's just the thought of that one thing, books is one way I've done it, even having the video games or the board games or however I can do it. However I can find that one thing that can touch someone to put a positive impact in the course of their life, I'm going to find a way to do it, And so that's my only hope for the future is that I'm still just in a place where I feel like my fingers are on those buttons, that I can design whether it's Books and Brews or whether it's online or whatever it is, some combination of that, then my fingers are still on those buttons that I feel like I can press, that I can help people.
Absolutely beautiful. Great way to end it, man.
Thank you.
Jason Wuerfel, Books and Brews, here at the Mothership on 96th Street. Go check them out. See them online. Visit them. Come be part of a place for people without a place, my man. Thanks for doing
Thank
this.
you. Appreciate it.
All right, my man.
Yeah, right on.
Sweet.
Cheers.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. For the latest on financial views with local brews, please check out our website at financialviewswithlocalbrews.com. You can also find us on YouTube via our channel there under the same name, Financial Views with Local Brews, as well as follow us on all of our social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, where you can like and connect with us throughout the craft beer universe that we're trying to explore here in the great state of Indiana. As always, cheers. The next round's on me, and I look forward to seeing you for future episodes. Bye, everyone.